Hi, my name is Ebenezer Safwadu. I'm a business strategy consultant and a data specialist. If you've been following my channel, I've been doing a series on business intelligence gurus, especially with Power BI. Today, I have a very interesting guest, and we're going to discuss something on visualization, especially the front end of Power BI. I have with me today Daniel Marsh-Patrick. Daniel, welcome.
Hey, Ebenezer, how you doing? It's really lovely to be here. Thank you.
Nice having you around. It's always nice talking about visualizations because at the end of the day, after all the coding and all the nice things back end, it is the visualizations that people would see. So it's important that the last bit of the BI has to also come out well. And I'm grateful to have a guru. I mean, you've seen it all from a full stack developer and majoring in visualization. So Daniel, can you tell a little bit about yourself, how you got into this and your path so far?
Yeah, I think I'll try and do the short version because I've been doing this for I've been in IT and industry for 20 odd years. I've been doing BI for the last 12 or so. I've been through the gamut of working in operations and IT and technical teams in software development, but it's always been about stakeholders for me and what they get out of what they're doing. So I really sort of almost fell into BI 12 years ago, getting into performance testing software for a software company I was working at. And what we were able to do was very easily digest millions and millions of rows of performance data and start to produce very high level statistics for stakeholders and management that weren't so interested in the transactions, but they were very interested in the performance. So we were automating those tools, scraping that data using tools like R and Excel and Python and whatever we could get our hands on to take weeks and weeks of data and just squash it all down and abstract and aggregate it within a couple of minutes. Automatically publish that, and then people could just see change from time to time. And I didn't really realize at the time that that was business intelligence, but very shortly I got the bug and fell into the Microsoft stack probably about a year and a half then, so about 11 years ago. Working with SQL Server, reporting services, the enterprise BI stack for Microsoft, working in modeling, ETL, and visualization, and working with stakeholders. So I got to see the full stack. I've got to work with teams. I've got to head up teams. I've got to transform companies in terms of their reporting over the years. And along the way, fortunately, got into Power BI very, very early. So I was able to start working with it quickly and understanding its impact on stakeholders and simplifying their lives. So yeah, I think I've just celebrated my 6th year on the Power BI community. I think I was one of the first 75 users on there, which is when there's over 1 million now. That's quite quite fascinating. The community is huge now. But then I think I wouldn't say I'd reached the zenith of Power BI because Power BI is always changing, but I had a pretty good grasp of how it could work strategically in a business and how it could help people. But I was becoming I'd say frustrated is a fair word. It's not too strong, but I was becoming frustrated with some of the visual features in Power BI for my needs. So eventually, I think custom visuals came up very quickly after Power BI became generally available. But I kind of saw them as a bit of a novelty, and I certainly appreciated them, but I always felt they were a little out of my reach and had avoided learning them. But then back in about 2018, I needed a feature that wasn't there, and I thought, right, that's it, I'm going to have to learn. And ever since then, I've been really kind of obsessed with the visual layer and learning it and understanding how it works, so particularly the custom visual space, but also a little bit more about visualizations in general. And one thing that's really helped me learn is to develop and release visuals via app source. So the store in Power BI, you could choose visuals from this marketplace. I have 3 visuals in there at the minute. I'm working on a 4th, but I also do a lot of other sort of private development work, and I work with Discover AI, who you had Alice on the other day. So I'm very fortunate to work with her and her husband, Christian. We've done custom visuals there as well, and I'm basically helping the community, helping others to learn how to build custom visuals. They're quite a nebulous subject, but they're incredibly fascinating to me.
Wow, what a background. I mean, clearly you've proven that if it is not there, you can build it yourself. Practically, that's what you're saying there. You face the challenge, You're getting frustrated in a certain way. You feel that, why don't I pretty much build my own visuals that I can use? And that's the beauty of Power BI and its flexibility, for you to be able to do pretty much what you would want to get out of there. And that's what you've done. All right. So, Daniel, what would you say are the greatest limitations when it comes to visualizations, even before we get into the various visuals?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting subject. The thing with, so I'll just detour slightly. I'm very good at doing this, so please rein me in if I get off. So I think people do realize when they start talking to me, oh, hang on, he's going somewhere. He may come back. Hopefully, I will. The visualization I've learned because I came from a background similar to a lot of people where Power BI just did the visuals for me. I didn't have to worry about it. I could just drag a chart and it would work. I'd put a few fields in a box, much like a pivot table, and I start to play around with some properties. What I realized was there's two things actually. The first thing is I'll just predicate this, sort of bookend this by saying one thing you do when you learn how to build custom visuals is you appreciate just how much work has gone into the visuals that are in Power BI. It is mind-boggling just how well they've got them to work. So when you get frustrated, it's often hard to think about that. But the second part is those visuals have to serve so many people's use cases. So they're very well designed, they're very well polished, and they're absolutely fantastic. But they don't fit every hole. So a good example would be, for the most part, they cover a lot of common scenarios. And I would advocate choosing those visuals for a lot of common scenarios as well. It's tempting to find a cool visual that makes something look nice, but it's all about how the data is conveyed. And those visuals do that very, very well. But there are cases where they perhaps don't. There are some limitations. So a good example again would be Discovery Eye. We're an environmental analytics company, and in that field, there are a lot of visuals that are standard to the environmental industry, but they're not standard to, say, the finance industry, or they don't fit the common palette of charts, but they're very well established. And those are probably seen as niche to the industry on an aggregate. So it's often a case of, before custom visuals, you have to look at, and often this can be a good challenge, by the way, rather than jumping to a custom visual, it's really looking at what we're trying to communicate. So I have data ultimately. How do I communicate that? And you did hint at this, but the visuals they're what the business sees of your work. They I would love them to care about my beautiful star schema. I would love them to care about my ETL and my clean data that goes through the pipeline and the work I do to manage the stakeholders to get that clean. But the reality is that they see charts on a page. They see the interactivity. They see the convenience that they get. And it's just as important. We talk about a common analogy within BI is there's this iceberg. You see this top 10 or 20% is the report you see, and underneath the water is 80%, which is just all the stuff we have to put up with that the business perhaps doesn't appreciate, or sometimes can, but perhaps doesn't just get how hard it can be. And those issues still exist even in the domain where Power BI has simplified a lot of what we're doing. But visualization should have the same care and attention. It just doesn't always get the time at the end, because often when people start seeing things arrive, once you've got that data model working, it's you got to get it delivered, and often it's just drag the visuals out, put some stuff up, people see some insights. But often the process of just having a look at what questions we need to ask, and challenges we have from the business are, I don't know, I just want some charts, which is great for us as people that don't do those jobs. We have to try and put our hat on to emulate those people, what they're thinking. And we have to try and get a lot of empathy with them to try and maybe think how they think. And sometimes we have to suggest what they want, but there's a feedback loop. But ultimately, choice of visual really, it ultimately boils down to what you're looking to visualize. But it can be tempting to think, oh, I need the flashiest possible visual. And I do catch myself now thinking, oh, I wonder what I can do in the custom visual space to choose that. But ultimately, the visuals we've got are quite good. And sometimes it is about simplifying your requirements. But there are times when they perhaps don't fit what we want. The visuals are developed and controlled by Microsoft. And to a degree, custom visuals are the same. I'm a developer. I develop what I think the visual should be. I make that visual do what I think it should do. And Microsoft will go through the same process. They'll have a lot more people doing the research and development than just me. But I decide what properties to expose. I decide what happens when it's a certain size. So I'm effectively gatekeeping a creator's tooling. So the challenge with this is, we lay out the functionality, and there's a feedback loop. So, Microsoft have ideas that get listened to. They put those ideas into visuals. They release them through new releases of desktop. I, as a developer, might get somebody come to me and say, "Hey, could I have this feature?" And I'll develop that. But ultimately, creators are beholden to us. So even though we have the ability to create custom visuals, I'm still a developer that may not appreciate your use case. I'm just giving you something that maybe gets you halfway there. And I think that's a general shortcoming with visuals, is we don't have in Power BI the kind of ability to think, right, well, I've got a bar chart. What if I wanted to overlay some points on that bar chart using the same query? At the minute, I'd have to stack a couple of charts, and then I have to think about how to scale those charts the same. And that's two queries. And that's when we start running into shortcomings. And one thing that is probably a little bit lacking in the Power BI space is that knowledge of what we call visual grammar. So how is a chart composed? And when you develop visuals, you have to think in this space, because if I look at, say, a bar chart, that breaks down to some rectangles, which are positioned in a visual horizontally or vertically, depending on, if it's a linear series, it's best to position them vertically. If it's a categorical series that doesn't really have an order, then you'd put them at the side. So this is a bar versus column scenario. But the length of those rectangles is something that our brain perceives as a measure value. We can quickly resolve those things because we can understand relative distance. But ultimately, it boils down to the fact that that's a rectangle scaled based on the value of some measure and positioned based on the value of some category. And this is what we talk about. This is boiling down a very complicated concept into a soundbite. But this grammar of graphics, how do we think visually? So if I wanted to do something complex, how do I layer those things up to produce a visual that I think conveys my meaning as best I can?
Wow.
So tools, when you choose visuals off a palette, or you choose a custom visual, you'll be beholden to how the author of that visual, whether it be Microsoft or myself or other vendors, think how it should work. So that extensibility is quite tricky to manage. And conventionally, the way we would do that is we would have to learn how to write custom visuals, because we then have to then upskill into other areas. So with Power BI, you have DAX, you have M. These are languages we use in different use cases. M is for transformation and DAX is for modeling. But then this whole new world opens up, because Power BI is built for the web. Visuals are written in languages for the web, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And these are things that BI professionals conventionally don't have exposure to. Some might. I did beforehand, which did help my transition. But when you look at what's available to you and you say, right, well, I can choose this visual or I can find this custom visual and they don't do what I want, what's the alternative? Ooh, I can build a custom visual. And then you hit this great big wall. If you haven't done web development, you've immediately, it's like, can you imagine having to go back and learn, what you know now? Can you imagine having to throw all that away and learn DAX again?
Wow.
And the journey you take to achieve that. This is the same problem you face with learning a visual, and this is why a lot of people get frustrated. And there's very few of us that persist long enough or are stubborn enough to do that. So that what you see today, I guess, is me. I'm I'm a very patient person, but not everyone is so patient. Unfortunately, there are visuals coming. Oh, go on.
I can imagine that. I think what you've tried to talk about, the fact that the great limitation in visualization is picking the right charts. And most of the time, the setback in there is the fact that even the charts that are there may not solve the particular problem that you may be facing to communicate what exactly you want to communicate to the stakeholders. Because visualization is the last step of communication to the stakeholders, all the work that you've done and trying to make meaning of all the data that you've been provided for. So the limitations always come, especially when you are in a unique field like environmental management that you talked about. The native visuals which Microsoft provide may have too much limitation because they are looking at the general use of the visual for every situation, because you're trying to generalize irrespective of what problem or what communication that one person would want to communicate to the stakeholders. It should be fit for purpose. And in generalization, you miss out with the advantages of specialized visuals. And in the specialized visual, you also miss out because it could be so niche that it can only be used for one particular purpose. And that is the balance that every developer or every front-end person may face. And that is what Patrick is talking about. The solution then becomes you will have to learn the languages that would have to build visualization, which is a whole new world on its own, because it's like relearning a new language altogether, with like relearning DAX, the M language all over again, because it has its own world that it opens you up to. So that's good, Patrick. But what would you say are your favorite custom visuals?
I think if I it sounds a little egotistical. I built my visuals because I needed them, so they kind of become your favorite because you're able to start doing things. But if I take myself out of that equation, I think there are visuals that I really admired for a long time before I even got involved. And I guess key ones, I don't really have them available to demo at the moment, but I think that, I mean, certainly I saw Alice demo one the other day. That was the Synoptic panel, which is by, well, OKViz, which are a division of
PureVis.
CPI, Marco and Alberto's companies. Brilliant visual. They also did the bullet chart, which I thought was an amazing visual. Microsoft had a version, but it wasn't, that one was a little more in line with conventional principles, but I preferred the OKViz one. They had the card with states visual, which was really valuable to begin with. In the early days of Power BI, that was just awesome. And then they've just beefed it up so much more over recent years. So I got a real soft spot for the OKViz team because they care a lot about the quality of their products. And not to say a lot of vendors don't, but that was early. That was an early on thing. Other ones, I mean, obviously Zebra BI is a fantastic visual. It's a commercial visual, but again, I think there's plenty of videos demoing that. And I think if you ever wanted to have someone on your call and you could get him, Andre from Zebra BI is an amazing thought leader.
Zebra BI was one of my first custom visuals that I used, especially for financial tables. It's excellent for the financial side.
Yeah, they're a team that really understands how to not only get the best out of the Power BI visual layer, but take visualization principles that we don't get exposure to in Power BI. So the IBCS, Andre is very big on that, the standards for communicating business visualization, but also just smarts, making the visual just convenient, less clicks, faster insights. It's absolutely amazing what they've been doing. If I take Zebra BI out of the equation, I mean, even Microsoft's visuals team publish visuals as Microsoft. The Power KPI visual, the Power KPI matrix visuals, those were two visuals that I was using everywhere. Absolutely incredible. And I think that we've gone from having maybe a pool of 30 or 40 when I first started to there's over 300 now in app source. So it's often hard for me to keep up. I used to like anxiously wait to see what appeared so I could see how I could use it, which may not have been the right approach. But I was always interested in keeping track. But even now I spend a lot of my time in my development environment working on my own visuals. I don't always get time to appreciate what other people are doing, but there's some really good stuff coming out from people are really starting to get it and help to elevate that visual layer. So there are whole suites of visuals coming out. You've got XViz, they've got a whole suite of visuals, but they also do, I think that team do ValQ visual, and they've just released InfoRiver, which is quite something.
Wow, InfoRiver.
InfoRiver, yeah. Reed Havens is just, I think he's had Gopal on who heads up the company to talk about it. InfoRiver is quite very, very feature-rich visual. It's almost like a full Basically, like you can do full P&L statements really, really easily. It's got its own expression language, highly customizable. It looks amazing.
Wow, I'll check it out.
And I think we're kind of we're almost in a little bit of a renaissance with that at the minute as well. I think these meta visuals or visuals that are significantly more complicated are starting to finally take hold. So you've got PureVis, which has just come out. That is a visual that lets you break down SVG images and bind data to them. So you can build animations that are bound to data. It's incredible. Charticulator
That
by
was
Microsoft, probably my favorite at the moment.
was the PureVis in the July update?
I expect so. I have to be careful because I see some updates before others. I'm trying to think which one it was. But I have heard that PureVis have just been certified, which is great news for them. But as I was just saying, I think Charticulator, which is a Microsoft visual, I'm a big fan of that. That's a visual you can take this stuff we were talking about, this visualization grammar, and start to use that to build your own charts within Power BI. I'm working on a visual called Deneb, which I'm very excited about. I'll be talking with Reed Evans about that very soon. Deneb is oh, sorry, go on.
I think Deneb was featured in the July update.
I would probably disagree because it's not in app source yet. So I'm the one. I'm writing that. So unless they mentioned it and I missed it, which would have been a shame, that one's not in app source yet. So this is a visual that takes a tool called Vega and Vega Lite, which are tools that the University of Washington Data Lab produced. So they're like, think R or Python, but you use a JSON-based language to build charts inside Power BI. So this uses that visual grammar approach as well. It's just slightly, it's kind of it sits between a tool like Charticulator and a full-blown custom visual. So you get to do a little bit more without having to learn web development. And this is my current focus. So there are, I think there's a lot of people that are working on this empowerment space where creators, creators shouldn't be beholden to us in a way. They should be able to express themselves using these tools to produce really unique and innovative visuals. And that's what excites me more than me producing a visual that does a particular thing. It's how can I produce a visual that allows people to express themselves without having to learn web development. That's the more exciting part for me at the minute. That's my focus right now. But we'll talk a little bit more about that with Reed next week, and hopefully we'll see that go into app source very soon. Because I don't sound it. I'm a very monotonous person. I have a very flat voice, but I'm really excited about the possibilities, and I'm seeing some amazing things from people already. So it's awesome.
We can't wait. I think we would all book a seat with your interview with Reed on 12th of August. All too soon, we've come to the end of this part one of the interview. In part one, Daniel has been showing us how he has built his own custom visuals, which is very useful, especially the small multiples. Check it out by going to your store, and then you can download a custom visual. Next week, we'll continue with Daniel, where he teaches us how to build these custom visuals ourselves. He will actually take us through the environment and then where to and what to do. So catch you next week. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more details.